Hello. In the news recently, there's been a lot of talk about the discovery of the oldest and largest Icelandic settlement ever found. But what wasn't so clear in these stories is that it will rewrite the sagas with slavery extinction and wealth beyond most Vikings' dreams, all brought on by a Muslim war going on thousands of miles away. So welcome to the real story about the oldest and largest Viking settlement in Iceland, and welcome to Cleckenford. To paint a picture of Icelandic history, the story of the first settler in Iceland goes something like this. Once upon a time there was a brave Viking chief called Ingólfur Arnason, and he took to the oceans with his family and farmhands to seek out a land far across the sea that only a few had travelled to. When Ingólfur saw this new uninhabited land rise from the sea, knowing nothing of its opportunities or the challenges it would present, he asked the gods for direction on where to settle. Ingólfur threw his high seat pillars overboard, swearing an oath to build his farm wherever they came ashore. The gods directed the pillars to Reykjavik, where Ingólfur made his home in the year 874. This saga has long been accepted as the origin story of Iceland's settlement, and in the Icelandic Book of Settlements, the Landnámabók, and the saga literature composed in the 11th to 14th centuries, Iceland was said to have been settled by noble Viking chieftains fleeing tyranny of the Norwegian crown. But these recent archaeological studies are showing us that we need to reconsider this story. And this recent news has added a lot of support and information to this, and to allow us to really understand what happened, the real story of the first Icelanders. You see, the Icelandic sagas provide Icelanders with a trove of stories to help understand how Iceland came to be, and as discussed in previous videos, and like many established stories, people believe these sagas hold complete truths, but without doubt these things would have changed in the storytelling. They're based on real people, and so this is wanting us to cling to them as truths, and this sometimes acts as a barrier to accepting new things. And the sagas have put this wall up in Icelandic history at the year 874, and this wall is so strong that even some scholars seem to be afraid to look beyond this and earlier into Iceland's history because of the strength of belief in these sagas. And so to the news about the findings at the excavations, and this is from a Viking site on a farm known as Stoths, located in Stothrafjörður in East Iceland, which you'll see on a map. And this farm, as well as several other sites across Iceland, are now providing clear proof of human presence in Iceland decades before the date Ingólfur was said to have settled in Reykjavik. So the excavations at Stoth first started in the autumn of 2015, and they've discovered finds that give evidence of when the early settlement in Iceland began and why. The current excavations have found a Viking armed farmstead dating back to about 860 CE, so not long before Ingólfur, and the building technology and the artefacts unearthed show a settlement farm run by someone who was very wealthy. And the longhouse in this farm is among the largest found in Iceland, at 31 metres or just over 100 feet long. And to understand how significant that is in Scandinavia, only chieftain farms had longhouses larger than 28 metres or 92 feet long. So this is someone very important. And within the site there were 92 beads found, as well as 29 silver objects, and these included Roman and Middle Eastern coins, and this makes it twice as large as the next two largest bead finds in Iceland combined. And one of the largest ever bead hoards found in Viking Age sites in the whole of Scandinavia. The people who lived here were very wealthy and important. So what makes this site even more fascinating is the fact that this farm is built on the ruins of an older farmhouse. And this older site, whilst it's still being pieced together what's going on, excavations are continuing, this older structure appears to be huge at 40 metres or 131 feet long. So to put this in context, the largest farmhouses found, longhouses found in Scandinavia measure about 50 metres or 164 feet long. And so This older longhouse, which has been radiocarbon dated and with other evidence, appears to be at least as old as the oldest structures ever found in Iceland. It's dated to around 800 CE, so 70 years older than when Ingólfur is said to have stepped foot on Iceland. So one of the interesting features of the older structure is the absence of bones of domesticated animals. Now this was not a farm that was used all year round, and the theory is that the older longhouse was in fact a seasonal hunting camp, operated by a Norwegian chief who outfitted voyages to Iceland to gather valuable resources and goods and brought them back across the sea to Norway. So these types of camps weren't unusual, and several sites in Iceland have already been confirmed as having human presence before the year 874, and there were particular sites in Reykjavik and Hafnir, for example. And again, there have been no associated domesticated animal bones in these sites either. So these were seasonal camps, but they would have played a vital role in the settlement of Iceland, as any permanent settlement would require prior exploration, and that would have been at a considerable risk and cost. These people would have followed a largely hunter-gathering existence until livestock had become established and was breeding. So we have to ask ourselves, why were the Vikings coming to Iceland in the first place? What were they transporting back? And then, why would hundreds, maybe thousands of people then embark on voyage across the ocean over the span of just a few decades without a firm knowledge of what awaited them? And so they must have known what was there. And so the version of events in the Icelandic Book of Settlements sounds very unlikely to have happened. It just wouldn't make sense, and it would be too big a risk to flee somewhere if you didn't know what was there. The Vikings needed a powerful motivation to make people want to take on this journey, a risky journey across the ocean to Iceland from Scandinavia. And it makes little sense to arrange these voyages if you're only going to bring back goods that are little value and bulky. You need high value, smaller goods. And Iceland had this, and it came in the form of ivory from walrus tusks. Now, for those of you who study wildlife, you may say, where did this walrus ivory come from? Because there's no walruses on Iceland. Well, in 2019, DNA analysis and radiocarbon dating of walrus tusks found in Iceland revealed that they belong to a previously unknown subspecies of Atlantic walrus. And the assumption until now had been that the bones belonged to stray animals from either Greenland or the Svalbard archipelago. But analysis found that Iceland was in fact home to a distinct subspecies of walrus, now known as the Icelandic walrus. And if we take a look at the Carta Marina, which is the first map of Scandinavia that gives place names, and it was made in 1539, you can see hints of animals that are believed to be walruses in various locations around Scandinavia. The Icelandic walrus appears to have lived along Iceland's shores for thousands of years, only to disappear within hundreds of years after the arrival of the settlers. And there could be many factors for this. There's several factors that could be contributed to the disappearance are climate changes and volcanic eruptions. But let's be honest, the most likely explanation is hunting. The total population was probably relatively small, maybe just hundreds if not thousands of animals, and they would have been completely unaccustomed to humans, and so it would have been easy to approach and kill these animals. Hence hunting could have wiped out the Icelandic walrus in a really short space of time. So the next question to ask then is, why was ivory such a valuable commodity? Was it in demand? And here we find that in Europe, ivory was a material the rich and noble and admired, and so therefore valued. But just before the time of this settlement in Iceland, what had actually happened is that the traditional supply of elephant ivory from Asia and India would have been disrupted, as it would have come from the Middle East. And at this time, the Muslims had just conquered the Middle East and Northern Africa, and by doing that, they affected the trade routes to Asia and Africa. And so Icelandic walrus ivory was a very valuable and available alternative. And in effect, the Vikings had come across an alternative source of a very useful and valuable commodity. But walruses were far more valuable than just their ivory, and ivory was not, wasn't the only thing the Vikings were after. Viking seafaring made significant advances with the walrus trade, and their hides were considered the most durable material, really good for ropes, essential for securing the large sails of Viking ships, and the oil from walrus blubber allowed for waterproofing of the ship's hulls and protected the hides from parasites. And then you had the added bonus that walrus meat was considered a really good flavoursome food. The walrus provided a plethora of good and valuable resources for the Vikings. So another thing that was also considered valuable, items of prestige, were the teeth of marine mammals. Narwhals, sperm whales and walrus teeth. These were known as tan avala, or toothware, and they were used by chiefs to signal and cement their position. And they were used to buy access into royal courts, in a way like an alternative to gold coins. And whilst we don't know the specific value of a sperm whale tooth, Iceland would have had an abundant source littered with the skeletons of sperm whales and walruses. The teeth of these are extremely hard and survive centuries. And with each sperm whale skull containing 50 to 70 teeth, the first explorers could have gathered boatloads of tanvala just by scavenging the shores. So, to put the value into context, we do know that just one single walrus tusk was worth the annual wages of one farm worker. So from this, it's easy to consider that Iceland's discovery was a kind of gold rush boomtown moment that sort of propelled the expansion of the Viking world westward. And it's certainly worth considering that the colonisation of Greenland came from when the depletion of the Icelandic walrus population happened, through excessive hunting, and then this drove the Vikings to discover North America. And with these things considered, hunting camps like those at Stoth and in Reykjavik would have been crucial to the settlement of Iceland. They would have served as key staging points for further colonisation at the east and west points of the island, and new settlers would have arrived at these sites to gather information. There they would have found experienced guides with knowledge of the land, ocean currents, good harbours, where rivers could be forded, which streams and lakes had the best catch of salmon and trout, which bays and fjords were home to the largest bird colonies. It's easy to imagine that alongside walrus hunting, scouts and hospitality would have been the cornerstone occupations of the first inhabitants of Iceland. So, but people settled from all over the Norse world, and genetic research shows that they came from Scandinavia and the British Isles. But there was an intriguing imbalance of sort of genders in terms of where they came from. So whilst 75 to 80% of men came from Scandinavia, as many as 60% of women came from the Gaelic regions of the British Isles, Scotland and Ireland. And it's thought that the Vikings were literally collecting wives from these shores on the way to Iceland. The excavation at Stoth has added a whole new layer to our understanding of what was going on alongside the walrus trade. There's been also discoveries of a large number of stone tools, chips of jasper, opals and flint created by stoneworking, and Stone Age style tools were found in abundance here too. And that's interesting, because why would this technology be being used by Vikings who were an Iron Age culture? Well, it became clear that these tools were actually used by the Sami, a nomadic group who lived alongside the Norse in northern Scandinavia, and the Sami craftsmen were expert bone carvers and would have provided skilled labour for the Icelandic ivory industry. So this makes Stoth, unique. We don't know much else about the economy of early Icelandic settlements, but the number of beads and pearls and silver at Stoth certainly suggests that there was significant wealth and trade, and walrus hunting would have played a vital role during the early exploration and initial settlement of Iceland. This potentially generated enormous riches for the first settlers, but the majority of immigrants who arrived in the late 9th and early 10th century, and they didn't come to hunt walrus on a large scale. So what we're seeing here is a picture of where great chiefs who are described in the sagas as the first settler of Iceland, they didn't arrive until after a society had been established. Land would only be an asset to the wealthy if people were already there working it, and a social structure was there to support these people. That had to be established before the wealthy would arrive. And so, to summarise, even now, historians have still yet to write conclusively that the walrus trade and seasonal hunting camps were part of the early history of Iceland. However, we can be sure that the saga tells where the first settlers were noble and freedom-loving chiefs escaping the taxation of Norwegian central power, guided by the divine hand that steered the high seat pillars to Reykjavik. Well, these sagas just aren't true. Instead, we have nameless inhabitants of hunting camps like the one at Stoth, looking for riches, walrus hunters and Sami craftsmen, and thousands of people of all ranks who followed in their footsteps to make a fresh start at what was the edge of the world. And that is the true story of the largest and oldest Icelandic settlement, and how Iceland came to be a Viking colony. So I hope you liked that story. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the Crackenfold YouTube channel. It does mean a lot. There are also discussions going on the Facebook side, a lot of things about the historicity of Jesus, for example. I'm having to moderate that quite well because there's some strong views in there. But yes, please support this channel by liking and subscribing. It does mean a lot, and I'll continue to make these videos. Comment below if you want to expand on anything we've told. If you've got any questions, if you've got any thoughts, I'll be interested to hear them, because it helps me read more and allow me to create more videos for you. So until the next video, stay safe, stay well, and take care. And this was Crackenfold. Thank you.